They said I wasn't good enough for their world. Too black, too poor, too ordinary for a woman like her. My own wife divorced me with those exact words, then had the audacity to send me a wedding invitation 2 months later. Everyone expected me to crawl into a hole and disappear, but I had other plans. When I pulled up to that country club wedding in a machine that cost more than most people's houses, the whispers stopped and the assumptions shattered. What happened next proved that sometimes the best revenge isn't a dish served cold, it's served with a perfectly tuned engine and the quiet confidence of a man who knows his worth. You see, they thought they knew exactly who Marcus Hale was, but they had no idea what I'd built while they weren't paying attention. If you're watching this story unfold, hit that subscribe button and tell me where you're watching from. I want to know if you've ever been underestimated because of who you are. The cream-colored envelope sat on Marcus Hale's kitchen counter like a ghost from his past. He stared at it while stirring his pasta, the wooden spoon moving in slow circles through the boiling water. The fancy paper felt thick between his fingers when he finally picked it up. His name was written in perfect cursive. Mr. Marcus Hale. No plus one mentioned. Just him. Marcus tore open the envelope carefully. Inside was the most expensive wedding invitation he'd ever seen. Gold edges, raised letters, the kind of paper that probably cost more than most people spent on groceries in a week. Ava Catherine Whitmore and Trent William Caldwell request your presence. He read it twice, then a third time. 2 months. It had been exactly 2 months since their divorce was final. 2 months since Ava had looked him in the eye and said the words that still burned in his chest. You'll hold me back, Marcus. You're too black, too poor. I can't build the life I want with someone like you. Now she was inviting him to watch her marry someone else. Marcus set the invitation down and drained his pasta. The kitchen felt too quiet, too empty. He grabbed his phone and took a picture of the invitation, then sent it to his best friend and business partner. Nate's response came back in seconds, a string of angry emojis followed by, "Are you serious right now? What kind of sick game is this?" Marcus typed back, "Don't know. Just got it." His phone rang immediately. "Bro, tell me you're not thinking about going to this thing." Nate's voice was tight with anger. "I haven't decided anything yet." "Marcus, listen to me. This is some twisted rich girl power move. She's trying to humiliate you." Marcus walked to his small living room window. Outside, Charleston's evening light painted the old buildings golden. His apartment wasn't fancy, but it was his. Clean, peaceful, a place where no one told him he wasn't good enough. "Maybe," he said, "or maybe she just sent invitations to everyone she knew." "Don't make excuses for her." Nate's voice softened. "After what she said to you? After how she treated you? You don't owe her anything." Marcus thought about their last fight, the way Ava's voice had changed when her mother started whispering in her ear. How quickly love had turned to shame. How fast forever had become never. "I know that," he said quietly. "Good. Throw that thing in the trash and forget about it." After Nate hung up, Marcus sat at his small kitchen table. The invitation lay next to a stack of papers from work. Salvage titles for car parts, a project estimate for a 2010 Lamborghini Gallardo that had been sitting in their shop for months. The owner was finally ready to rebuild the engine. Marcus had always been good with his hands, good with engines, good at taking broken things and making them whole again. It was honest work, hard work, the kind of work that left oil under your fingernails and pride in your chest. Ava used to say she loved that about him, used to trace the small scars on his hands from years of fixing things, used to tell him he was the most real person she'd ever met. But her mother's voice had been louder than her heart. "You'll hold me back." Marcus picked up the Lambo paperwork. The owner was paying cash for the rebuild, enough to cover shop expenses for 2 months. enough to buy that new diagnostic computer Nate had been wanting. He thought about the day he'd met Ava. She'd brought her BMW to the shop with a mysterious rattle. He'd found a loose bolt in 5 minutes, but she'd stayed for an hour asking questions about engines and cars and how he'd learned to fix things. She'd been wearing a simple sundress that day, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail. No makeup, just natural beauty and curious eyes. "You make it look so easy," she'd said, watching him tighten the bolt. "Most problems are simple once you understand what's really wrong," he'd replied. She'd smiled. "I like that. Simple solutions." 3 years later, she'd decided their relationship was the problem that needed a simple solution. Cut him loose and marry someone who looked better on paper. Marcus stood up and walked to his bedroom. He set his alarm for 6 in the morning. The Lambo wasn't going to rebuild itself, and he had work to do. But he left the invitation on the kitchen counter. The next morning came early and cold. Marcus unlocked the garage bay at Hale Rios Auto Restoration just as the sun started painting the sky pink. The familiar smell of motor oil and metal welcomed him home. He started coffee and opened his tool chest. Everything in its place, every wrench and socket where it belonged. Order made sense. Chaos didn't. While the coffee brewed, he walked over to the Lambo. Someone had crashed it into a tree 6 months ago. The owner thought it was totaled. Insurance had already paid out, but Marcus could see past the bent metal and cracked plastic. Under all that damage was a machine that wanted to run again. He touched the hood, gently. "We're going to get you right, aren't we?" The memory hit him without warning. Ava's voice from their last real conversation, before the lawyers and the papers and the end. "You spend more time with those cars than you do with me." "I'm building something here, Ava. Building a business, a future. A future fixing other people's broken toys. A future where I own something, where I matter. You matter to me." But that had been a lie. Or maybe it had been true once, before her mother started counting the cost of loving a black mechanic from the wrong side of Charleston. Marcus shook his head and went back to his coffee. The past was the past. The Lambo needed new sensors and a clutch kit. That was real. That was now. He opened his laptop and pulled up the parts catalog. Sensors, fluids, gaskets. Each part had a price and a purpose. Unlike people, car parts didn't pretend to be something they weren't. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Hi, Mr. Hale. This is Leah Park from Whitmore Events. I'm coordinating logistics for the Magnolia Grove wedding this Saturday. Could you confirm your arrival window for parking coordination?" "Thanks so much." Marcus stared at the text. Someone was assuming he was actually going. Someone was planning around his presence. He thought about ignoring it, about deleting the whole thread and pretending none of this was happening. Instead, he typed back, "Will arrive by 4:45 p.m. as suggested. Thank you." The response came quickly. "Perfect. Looking forward to meeting you. The valet team will be expecting you." Valet team. Of course. Everything in Ava's world had valet teams and coordination and logistics. Everything had a price tag and a proper way to do it. Marcus closed the laptop and walked over to the Lambo. He popped the hood and stared at the engine bay. Someone had tried to fix this car before bringing it to him. They'd used the wrong bolts in 3 places and crossed 2 wires that should never touch. "Somebody didn't know what they were doing," he said to the engine. "But we can fix that." By noon, he had the old sensors out and the new ones in their packages. The work was going faster than he'd expected. Clean, precise, methodical. The way he'd been taught by his grandfather, who'd fixed cars back when you could actually fix them instead of just replacing computers. Nate showed up with lunch and immediately noticed the laptop still open to the parts catalog. "You're working on the Lambo today?" Seemed like a good day for it. Nate handed him a sandwich and leaned against the workbench. "You decide what you're doing Saturday?" Marcus took a bite of his sandwich. turkey and Swiss on wheat bread from the deli down the street. Simple food, real food. The kind Ava had stopped eating when her trainer told her carbs were the enemy. I RSVP'd, yes, he said. Nate nearly choked on his drink. You what? She invited me. I said yes. Marcus, what are you thinking? This is going to be a disaster. Marcus set down his sandwich and looked at his best friend. Nate had been there through everything. The good times with Ava, the slow breakdown, the terrible end. He'd watched Marcus lose weight and sleep and nearly lose his mind trying to figure out where it all went wrong. I'm thinking I got invited to a wedding and I said yes. That's all. That's not all, and you know it. You're walking into a room full of people who think you're not good enough to breathe their air. People who are going to whisper and point and probably say things that'll make you want to throw punches. Marcus nodded. Probably. So why do it? Because I RSVP'd, yes. Nate stared at him for a long moment. Then he shook his head and unwrapped his own sandwich. You're either the craziest man I know or the wisest. Jury's still out on that one. They ate in comfortable silence, listening to the distant sounds of the city. After lunch, they drove to the salvage yard on the outskirts of town. The yard was a maze of cars in various stages of decay. Some were there for parts. Others were waiting for someone to see past the rust and damage to the machine underneath. Marcus found what he was looking for in the back corner. A BMW M3 that had been rear-ended. The front end was perfect. The interior was pristine. The engine ran like a dream. How much? He asked Tasha, the yard manager. For the whole car? 2,000. Marcus walked around the car again. With the right work, it would be worth 15,000, maybe 20. Deal. They arranged for pickup on Monday and loaded the Lambo parts into Nate's truck. On the drive back to the shop, Marcus's phone rang. The caller ID said unknown. He answered on the fourth ring. Mr. Hale, this is Leah Park again. I hope I'm not bothering you. Her voice was soft, professional but kind. Nothing like the sharp edges he was used to from Ava's circle. Not at all. What can I do for you? I wanted to double-check the timing for Saturday. The ceremony starts at 5:30, but parking gets complicated if guests arrive too early. Would 4:45 still work for you? That's fine. Great. And I just wanted you to know, the valet team is very professional. They've handled some beautiful cars over the years. Marcus caught something in her voice, a small kindness, a recognition that he might be nervous about trusting strangers with something valuable. I appreciate that, he said. Of course. I'll see you Saturday, Mr. Hale. After she hung up, Nate glanced over at him. The wedding planner? Event coordinator. She seems nice. Nice enough to warn you that you're walking into a snake pit? Marcus watched the familiar streets of Charleston slide past the window. Old houses with new money. Historic buildings where history was carefully sanitized for tourist consumption. Beautiful and hollow at the same time. Guess we'll find out Saturday. That evening, Marcus stood in his small kitchen, making a simple dinner. Grilled chicken and rice, steamed vegetables, food that would fuel his body without weighing him down. He thought about the last time he'd cooked for Ava. She'd picked at her plate and complained that everything was too heavy, too simple, too much like food poor people ate. We could order from that place downtown, she'd suggested. The one with the 7-course tasting menu. I like cooking, he'd said. I know, but don't you want to try new things? Expand your horizons? What she'd really meant was, don't you want to become someone different? Someone who fits better in my world? Marcus ate his dinner slowly, tasting every bite. After he washed the dishes, he walked to his bedroom and opened the closet. In the back, wrapped in plastic, hung the black tuxedo he'd worn to their wedding. Their wedding had been small, simple. Ava had insisted they didn't need anything fancy, just close family and friends at a little chapel outside town. He'd believed her when she said she wanted simple. He'd believed her when she said she loved him exactly as he was. Marcus touched the plastic covering the tux. It would need to be cleaned and pressed. The bow tie would need to be tied properly. His shoes would need to be polished. If he was going to do this thing, he was going to do it right. He set his alarm for 7 in the morning and tried not to think about Saturday. Tried not to think about walking into a room full of people who'd already decided he didn't belong. Tried not to think about seeing Ava again. But as he lay in the dark, Marcus couldn't stop remembering the last thing she'd said to him on the day their divorce was final. "I hope you find someone who can love you the way you deserve." At the time, it had sounded like pity, like one more way to make their ending his fault. Now, lying in his own bed in his own apartment, Marcus realized it might have been the truest thing she'd ever said to him. The question was, could he love himself that way? Saturday would tell. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crisp Charleston air that made everything feel possible. Marcus woke up before his alarm and lay in bed for a few minutes, listening to the city wake up around him. Car engines starting, coffee shops opening, people heading to jobs that mattered to them. He thought about the Lambo waiting in the shop. Yesterday, he'd finished installing the new clutch kit. Today, he'd run the diagnostic tests and take it for a road test. By tomorrow, it would be purring like it was meant to. Marcus showered and dressed in his work clothes, jeans that fit right, a t-shirt that had seen better days but was clean and comfortable, work boots that had walked thousands of miles across concrete shop floors. At the shop, he found Nate already there, coffee brewing and the morning light streaming through the big windows. "You're early," Marcus said. Couldn't sleep, kept thinking about tomorrow. Marcus poured himself coffee and walked over to the Lambo. He'd spent 3 months bringing this car back to life. New engine components, fresh paint where the damage had been worst, interior pieces restored to their original beauty. "She's ready," he said, running his hand along the hood. "The car's ready. Question is whether you are." Marcus connected the diagnostic computer and ran through the system checks. Everything came back green. Engine temperature optimal, fluid levels perfect, all sensors reporting normally. "Let's take her for a test drive," he said. They rolled the car out of the bay and onto the morning street. Marcus slid into the driver's seat and felt the leather wrap around him like a glove. The engine started with a whisper that promised power. He drove carefully through the neighborhood streets, listening to every sound the car made. The transmission shifted smoothly. The brakes felt confident and strong. The steering responded to the smallest touch. "How's she feel?" Nate asked from the passenger seat. "Like she never wants to be broken again." They drove to the edge of town and back, putting the car through its paces. By the time they returned to the shop, Marcus was satisfied. The Lambo was better than it had been before the accident. Stronger, more reliable. "Owner's going to be happy," Nate said as they parked. "That's the point." Marcus spent the rest of the morning on paperwork, invoices for parts, labor logs, insurance forms, the boring side of running a business that most people never saw. At lunch, he drove to the tailor shop downtown. Mr. Jenkins had been pressing suits and fixing 'em for 40 years. His small shop sat between a coffeehouse and a bookstore, the kind of place that survived on quality and word of mouth. "Mr. Hale?" The old man smiled when Marcus walked in. "Come for your tuxedo fitting?" "Yes, sir." Mr. Jenkins led him to the fitting room and pulled out a classic black tux. Nothing flashy, no shiny lapels or fancy buttons, just clean, simple lines that would make any man look dignified. "Try this on and we'll see what needs adjusting." Marcus changed into the tux and studied himself in the three-way mirror. The jacket fit his shoulders perfectly, the pants were the right length, The whole outfit made him look like someone who belonged at fancy events. Very nice, Mr. Jenkins said, making small marks with chalk. You have good posture, good shoulders. This style suits you. Thank you. Special occasion? Marcus thought about how to answer that. A wedding. Ah, well, you'll look very sharp. The ladies will notice. Mr. Jenkins made a few small adjustments and pinned the hem of the pants. The whole process took 20 minutes. Can you have it ready by tomorrow morning? Marcus asked. Of course. Pick up any time after 9. Marcus paid for the alterations and stepped back onto the sidewalk. The afternoon sun felt warm on his face. People walked past with purpose, heading to jobs and appointments and lives that made sense to them. His phone buzzed. Unknown number, again. Mr. Hale, this is Leah Park. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. Not at all. I wanted to touch base about tomorrow's logistics. The valet team will be set up by 4:30. When you arrive, just pull up to the main entrance. They'll take good care of your car. There was something in her voice that made Marcus pay attention, a kindness that seemed genuine. I appreciate that, he said. Of course, and I wanted you to know, if you need anything tomorrow, anything at all, please don't hesitate to find me. I'll be wearing a navy blue dress with a small white flower pin. That's very kind of you. It's just, well, I know these events can be overwhelming, even for invited guests. Marcus stopped walking. Something in the way she said, even for invited guests, made him think she understood more than she was letting on. Thank you, Ms. Park. I'll see you tomorrow. After she hung up, Marcus stood on the sidewalk for a moment. In all the times he'd attended events with Ava, no one had ever offered to help him feel comfortable. No one had ever seemed to care if he was overwhelmed. He thought about calling Nate to tell him about the conversation, but decided against it. Some things were better kept simple. That evening, Marcus made himself a quiet dinner and tried to focus on anything except tomorrow. He reviewed the paperwork for the BMW he'd bought at the salvage yard, checked the weather forecast for the weekend, answered emails from potential customers. But his mind kept drifting to the last wedding he'd attended with Ava, her cousin's marriage to a doctor from Atlanta. Marcus had worn the same tux he'd wear tomorrow. Ava had introduced him to her relatives as my boyfriend Marcus. He works on cars. Not he owns his own business. Not he's an expert mechanic. Just he works on cars. Like that was all he was. All he'd ever be. The cousin's husband had tried to be friendly, asking questions about engines and sports cars, but Marcus could see the calculation behind the man's eyes, figuring out how much money a black mechanic might make, whether Marcus was good enough for their precious Ava. By the end of that night, Marcus had felt like a specimen in a jar, something interesting to look at but not quite real. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow he'd be going alone. Marcus set his alarm for 7 and tried to sleep, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw Ava in her wedding dress, beautiful and untouchable, surrounded by people who thought love was something you could buy and sell. He thought about the divorce papers they'd signed, how quickly 3 years had been reduced to asset division and custody arrangements for things they'd bought together. The coffee table from the furniture store downtown, the dishes they'd picked out when they moved in together, the framed photo of their vacation to Savannah where they'd talked about buying a house and having kids and growing old together. All of it divided up like a business transaction. All of it reduced to who got what and who paid for what and who deserved what. The only thing they'd fought over was the engagement ring. Ava had tried to give it back to him, saying she didn't feel right keeping it. Keep it, Marcus had told her. Sell it if you want. I don't care. But he had cared. He'd cared that she wanted to erase every trace of their time together. Cared that she couldn't wait to pretend he'd never existed. Saturday morning came too soon and not soon enough. Marcus woke up before his alarm and lay in bed listening to his heartbeat. Today was the day. No more thinking, no more planning, just action. He showered and shaved carefully, taking time to get every detail right. He dressed in casual clothes and drove to the shop to check on the Lambo one more time. The car sat in the bay like a sleeping panther, black paint that reflected the morning light, chrome that gleamed like jewelry, every surface perfect. Marcus ran his hands along the hood and whispered, "Today's your day to shine." At 9 o'clock, he drove to Mr. Jenkins's shop and picked up his tuxedo. The old tailor had wrapped it carefully in plastic and included a fresh white shirt and black bow tie. "You look nervous, son," Mr. Jenkins said as Marcus paid. "A little. Remember, a tuxedo is just clothes. The man wearing it is what matters." Marcus thanked him and drove back to his apartment. He hung the tux on his bedroom door and tried to eat lunch, but his stomach felt too tight for food. At 2 o'clock, he started getting ready. He took another shower and put on the tuxedo piece by piece, shirt first, then pants, then the jacket. The bow tie took 3 tries, but he finally got it right. In the mirror, he looked like a different person, polished, sophisticated, the kind of man who belonged at country club weddings and charity galas. But underneath the fancy clothes, he was still Marcus Hale. Still the kid who'd learned to fix cars in his grandfather's garage. Still the man who believed that honest work and good character were worth more than money and status. At 3:15, he drove to the shop and switched to the Lambo. The engine started with its familiar whisper. The dashboard glowed with soft light. Every system was perfect. Marcus adjusted the rearview mirror and looked at himself one more time. "Here we go," he said. The drive to Magnolia Grove took 30 minutes through Charleston's winding streets. The venue sat on a hill overlooking the Ashley River, surrounded by ancient oak trees draped with Spanish moss. As he turned into the long driveway, Marcus saw the other cars arriving: BMWs and Mercedes, a few Porsches, 1 or 2 Ferraris, all of them expensive, all of them driven by people who'd never worried about making rent or buying groceries, but none of them sounded like the Lambo. Marcus pulled up to the main entrance where a team of valets waited in crisp white uniforms. The captain, a middle-aged black man with kind eyes, stepped forward as Marcus got out of the car. "Evening, Mr. Hale," the man said with a smile. "Beautiful machine you've got here." "Thank you. You've seen this car before?" "Oh, yes, sir. You brought her to the collector car night at the marina last month. I was working that event too. She sounds even better now." Marcus handed over the keys, surprised that the man remembered him. "Take good care of her." "Always do, sir." As Marcus walked toward the ceremony area, he heard a groomsman whisper to his companion, "Must be a rental. No way that guy owns a car like that." The valet captain's voice carried clearly across the entrance. "That's Mr. Hale's car. He rebuilt that engine himself. Beautiful work." The groomsman went quiet. Marcus smiled and kept walking. Sometimes the truth spoke louder than whispers. The ceremony area was set up on a large lawn overlooking the river. White chairs arranged in perfect rows, a string quartet tuning their instruments, flowers everywhere, the kind that cost more per arrangement than most people made in a week. And everywhere, people who belonged to Ava's world, people in expensive clothes talking about expensive things, people who measured worth in dollars and status symbols. Marcus found a seat in the 5th row and settled in to wait. In a few minutes, he'd see Ava again. In a few minutes, this whole strange chapter of his life would finally close. But first, he had to get through the ceremony. He had to watch the woman he'd loved marry someone else. He had to sit quietly while she promised forever to a man who could give her the life she thought she wanted. Marcus straightened his bow tie and checked his watch. 4:55. 5 minutes until it all began. At exactly 5 o'clock, a woman in a navy blue dress approached Marcus's row. She had kind eyes and moved with the quiet confidence of someone used to managing details that mattered. "Mr. Hale," she said softly, "I'm Leah Park." Marcus stood and shook her hand. "Nice to meet you. Thank you for being so flexible with the timing. Can I get you anything? Water? A program?" There was something genuine in her offer, not the fake politeness he was used to from Ava's crowd, but real concern for his comfort. "I'm fine. Thank you." "Of course. I'll be moving around during the ceremony, but if you need anything at all, just catch my eye." She handed him a program printed on the same expensive paper as the invitation, then moved on to check with other guests. Marcus watched her work, noting how she spoke to everyone the same way. Rich or poor, family or friend, she treated each person with the same respect. The string quartet began playing soft background music. More guests arrived and took their seats. Marcus recognized some faces from parties he'd attended with Ava. Others were strangers who looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine about successful people living successful lives. At 5:15, Eleanor Whitmore glided down the aisle in a champagne-colored dress that probably cost more than most people's cars. She moved with the practiced grace of someone who'd spent decades being the most important person in every room she entered. Her eyes swept over the assembled guests, cataloging who was there and where they were sitting. When her gaze landed on Marcus, her smile froze for just a moment before snapping back into place. She took her seat in the front row and whispered something to the woman beside her. Both of them glanced back at Marcus, their faces carefully neutral. Marcus kept his expression calm. He'd expected this, expected the whispers and the looks and the calculations about why he was there. At 5:25, the groomsmen took their places at the front of the ceremony area. Trent stood at the altar in a perfectly tailored tux, his hair styled like he'd stepped out of a men's fashion magazine. He looked confident and comfortable, like a man who'd never doubted his place in the world. The music changed, and the bridesmaids began their procession down the aisle. Four women in pale pink dresses, each one beautiful and polished. Leah was the third bridesmaid, and she gave Marcus a small, professional nod as she passed his row. Then the music swelled, and everyone stood. Ava appeared at the back of the aisle, and Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat. She was stunning. Her dress was simple and elegant, perfectly fitted to her slim figure. Her blonde hair was swept up in an intricate style that showed off her neck and shoulders. Her makeup was flawless, her smile radiant. She looked like a princess from a fairy tale, like someone who'd never known a moment of doubt or struggle or pain. But Marcus could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers gripped her bouquet a little too tightly, the slight tremor in her smile when she spotted him in the crowd. She walked down the aisle on her father's arm, moving with measured steps toward her future. As she passed Marcus's row, their eyes met for one brief moment. In that instant, Marcus saw something flicker across her face. Surprise? Regret? Relief? He couldn't tell, and then the moment was over. Ava was at the altar, standing beside Trent, ready to promise her life to someone else. The ceremony began with words about love and commitment and building a future together. The minister spoke about the importance of choosing a partner who would stand by you through good times and bad, who would love you for who you really were. Marcus listened to the familiar words and thought about his grandparents, who'd been married for 53 years before his grandfather passed. They'd met when they had nothing but love and hope and the determination to build something good together. His grandfather had worked 3 jobs to put his grandmother through nursing school. She'd worked double shifts to help him start his auto repair shop. They'd faced racism and poverty and health scares and family tragedies, but they'd faced all of it together. That was the kind of love Marcus had thought he'd found with Ava, the kind that got stronger under pressure instead of weaker. He'd been wrong. The minister asked Ava and Trent to face each other and share their vows. Trent went first, speaking about how Ava made him want to be a better man, how she brought light into his life, how he promised to love and protect her forever. The words were pretty and well rehearsed, but they felt empty to Marcus, like something written by a committee instead of spoken from the heart. Then it was Ava's turn. She looked into Trent's eyes and began to speak about partnership and respect and building a life that honored both their dreams. Her voice was clear and confident, but Marcus could hear the careful control in every word. These weren't the vows she'd written for their wedding. Those had been raw and honest and full of promises about loving each other exactly as they were. I promise to stand by you, Ava said to Trent, through whatever challenges we may face. Marcus thought about the challenges they'd faced together. The time his grandfather had his heart attack, and Marcus had spent 3 weeks at the hospital. The year the shop had struggled, and they'd lived on rice and beans for 2 months. The night he'd come home exhausted and discouraged, and she'd held him while he cried about feeling like he wasn't enough for anyone. Those challenges had been too much for her in the end, too real, too poor, too black. The minister pronounced them husband and wife, and Trent kissed Ava while the crowd applauded. Marcus clapped politely and watched as they walked back down the aisle together, smiling and waving at their guests. As they passed his row, Ava's eyes found his again. This time, her smile faltered slightly, and she looked away quickly. The recession music played, and the guests began filing out of their rows to head to the cocktail reception. Marcus waited until most of the crowd had moved before standing up. "Excuse me, Mr. Hale?" He turned to find a young man in a groomsman's tux approaching him. The man had the soft look of someone who'd never worked with his hands, never worried about paying bills, never been told he wasn't good enough. "I'm Brad Morrison, Trent's college roommate," the man said, extending his hand. "I don't think we've met." Marcus shook his hand. "Marcus Hale. So, how do you know Ava and Trent?" The question was casual, but Marcus could hear the real question underneath. "What are you doing here?" "I know Ava," Marcus said simply. "From college?" "From before." Brad waited for more information, but Marcus didn't offer any. After an awkward moment, the groomsman excused himself and hurried away. Marcus walked slowly toward the cocktail area, set up on a large terrace overlooking the river. Servers moved through the crowd offering champagne and hors d'oeuvres that looked like tiny works of art. He accepted a glass of water from a passing server and found a spot near the edge of the terrace where he could see the river. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. "Mr. Hale?" He turned to find Leah approaching with a genuine smile. "How are you doing? I know these events can be overwhelming." "I'm fine. Thank you for checking." She stood beside him for a moment, looking out at the river. "It's beautiful here, isn't it? Sometimes I think the setting is more impressive than the celebration." Marcus glanced at her, surprised by the honesty in her voice. "You plan a lot of weddings?" he asked. "Too many," she said with a small laugh, "but they all teach me something about people, about what they really value." Before Marcus could ask what she meant, Eleanor Whitmore appeared beside them like a perfectly dressed shark. "Marcus, dear," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What a surprise to see you here." "Mrs. Whitmore, I have to ask, how are you managing these days? Since the divorce? I imagine it's been quite an adjustment." Her voice was sweet poison, designed to sound caring while delivering a calculated blow. "One bolt at a time," Marcus said evenly. Eleanor's smile flickered slightly. She'd expected him to stumble, to show weakness, to give her something to use against him. "Well, I'm sure you'll find your way. People like you always seem to land on your feet." "People like you?" The phrase hung in the air between them, loaded with everything she couldn't say directly. "If you'll excuse me," Eleanor continued, "I need to check on the photographer." She glided away, leaving Marcus and Leah standing alone. "I'm sorry about that," Leah said quietly. "Don't be. I expected it. Still, it wasn't right. Marcus looked at her more carefully. Most people in this crowd would have pretended not to notice the insult, or they would have made excuses for Eleanor's behavior. But Leah had called it what it was. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For seeing it." She nodded, understanding passing between them. Then she checked her watch and sighed. "I need to coordinate the dinner seating, but I wanted you to know if anyone gives you trouble tonight, anything at all, you find me, okay? I can handle myself. I know you can, but you shouldn't have to. Not at a wedding, not anywhere." She walked away, leaving Marcus standing by the river with a strange feeling in his chest. When was the last time someone had offered to protect him? When was the last time someone had seen him as worthy of protection? The sun continued to set, and the cocktail reception flowed around him. Marcus sipped his water and watched the crowd, lawyers and doctors and business owners, people who'd never known what it felt like to be the only black face in a room full of white wealth. A server approached with a tray of champagne. "Champagne, sir?" Marcus accepted a glass and nodded his thanks. The server, a young black woman with tired eyes, hesitated for a moment. "Are you Mr. Hale?" she asked quietly. "Yes. My boyfriend works at Henderson's Salvage. Says you bought that M3 yesterday. Says you always treat everyone fair." Marcus smiled. "Your boyfriend's got good eyes for cars. He wants to open his own shop someday, like yours. Tell him to start small and build slow. Good work speaks for itself." The server smiled and moved on. Marcus watched her go, thinking about all the invisible people who made events like this possible. The ones who served the food and parked the cars and cleaned up afterward. The ones who went home to apartments like his and worried about bills like his and dreamed dreams like his. The ones that people like Eleanor Whitmore never really saw. A commotion near the main building caught his attention. Two servers were whispering urgently to a coordinator with a clipboard. Marcus caught fragments of their conversation. "Won't start. Tried everything. Calling roadside." He moved closer and heard more. "It's Mr. Caldwell's car, the vintage Jaguar. Dead battery, maybe? The photographer wants to use it for the send-off photos." The coordinator looked stressed. "How long for roadside assistance?" "At least an hour. Maybe two." Marcus stepped forward. "Excuse me, is there a problem?" The coordinator, a woman named Dana, according to her name tag, looked at him gratefully. "One of the cars for the photo shoot won't start. We're trying to figure out alternatives." "What kind of car?" 1967 Jaguar E-Type. Belongs to the groom." Marcus knew that car. Classic British engineering with classic British electrical problems. Probably a loose connection or a corroded terminal. "I might be able to help," he said. Dana's face brightened. "Really? Are you a mechanic?" "I am, but I'm also a guest tonight." The words came out before he could stop them. He was here as an invited guest, not as the help. He wasn't going to crawl under cars in his tuxedo to solve Trent's problems. "Of course," Dana said quickly. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to assume—" "It's fine, but you might want to call a professional service. They'll have the right tools." Marcus walked away, leaving Dana to figure out her own solution. He'd spent too many years being seen only as someone who fixed things for other people. Tonight, he was just a guest at a wedding. Even if it was the wedding of the woman who'd broken his heart. The dinner reception moved to the grand ballroom as evening settled over Magnolia Grove. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables decorated with white roses and gold accents. Everything sparkled. Everything looked perfect. Marcus found his assigned seat at table 12, toward the back of the room, far from the head table where Ava and Trent sat like royalty, but not so far that he felt completely exiled. His tablemates were a mix of distant relatives and family friends. They made polite conversation about the weather and the food and how beautiful everything looked. No one asked him how he knew the bride. During the salad course, Marcus noticed activity near the service entrance, staff members whispering urgently to each other. Dana, the coordinator, speaking quickly into her headset. Something was wrong. Leah appeared at his table, moving with the calm efficiency of someone used to handling problems. "Excuse me, Mr. Hale," she said quietly. "Could I speak with you for just a moment?" Marcus followed her to a quiet corner near the windows. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, "but we have a situation. The insurance writer for the expanded valet service has a glitch. Our liability coverage depends on verification from the primary contractor." She handed him a tablet showing an insurance form. Marcus recognized his company's logo and information. "This is your business?" Leah asked. "The holding company. We do overflow detailing for big events sometimes. The rider was filed months ago for tonight's event, but the insurance company needs verbal confirmation from the authorized representative." Marcus looked at the form more carefully. Hale Rios Detail Services. The contract they'd signed in February to provide backup car care for peak season events at venues around Charleston. "You're the authorized representative," Leah said. It wasn't a question. "Yes. Would you be willing to confirm the coverage? It would just take a phone call." Marcus thought about it. This wasn't about fixing cars or crawling under engines. This was about a legitimate business contract his company had signed, professional obligations they'd committed to. "Of course," he said. The phone call took 5 minutes. Marcus spoke to the insurance company's after-hours service, confirmed his identity and his company's coverage for the event. Everything was properly documented and filed. When he hung up, Leah looked relieved. "Thank you so much. That could have been a real problem." "Just business," Marcus said. But as they walked back toward the dining room, he noticed Dana speaking quietly to Eleanor Whitmore. Both women looked in his direction, and Eleanor's expression shifted from annoyance to something else. Surprise, maybe, or calculation. The main course arrived, and dinner conversation resumed. Marcus ate his chicken and listened to stories about golf games and vacation homes and charity fundraisers. Normal talk for this crowd, foreign language for him. During dessert, the band began setting up for dancing. Marcus excused himself and stepped out onto the terrace for some air. The night was warm and clear. Music drifted from the ballroom, mixing with the sound of the river flowing below. A few other guests had escaped outside, smoking cigars and talking business. "There you are." Marcus turned to find Ava walking toward him. She'd changed from her ceremony dress into something simpler for the reception. Still beautiful, but more like the woman he'd known. "Hello, Ava." She stopped a few feet away, maintaining careful distance. "I wasn't sure you'd actually come. You invited me?" "I know. I just—" She looked out at the river, gathering her thoughts. "Why did you come, Marcus?" It was a fair question, one he'd asked himself a dozen times since opening the invitation. "You invited me," he said again. "That's not an answer." Marcus studied her face in the soft light from the ballroom. She looked tired under her perfect makeup, stressed despite her successful night. "Maybe I wanted to see if you were happy," he said. "And? Are you?" Ava didn't answer right away. She twisted her wedding ring, a nervous habit she'd developed in the months before their divorce. "I'm married," she said finally. "That's not the same thing." Before she could respond, Trent appeared in the doorway. "There you are, babe. People are asking for the happy couple." His smile was bright and possessive. His hand found Ava's waist and pulled her close. "Trent, you remember Marcus?" Ava said. "Of course. The car guy." The dismissal in those 3 words was complete. Marcus wasn't a person with a name or a history or a connection to Ava. He was just the car guy. "Actually," Trent continued, "since you're here, maybe you could take a look at my Jag." Classic car problems, dead battery or something. The request was casual, but loaded. Trent was establishing the natural order. Rich man with a problem, working man who should fix it. I'm a guest tonight, Marcus said evenly. Right, but it would just take a minute. These old cars, they're temperamental. You should call a professional service. Trent's smile tightened. Come on, man. Help a guy out. The words hung in the air. Help a guy out. Like Marcus owed him something. Like being invited to the wedding meant he should be grateful enough to crawl under cars. I said no. Trent's face hardened. Excuse me? I said no. I'm not working tonight. Fine. Whatever. Trent turned to Ava. Come on, babe. Let's get back to our guests. He guided her toward the door, but Ava looked back at Marcus for a moment. Her expression was unreadable. Marcus stayed on the terrace for a few more minutes, watching the river flow in the darkness. When he finally went back inside, the dancing had started. Ava and Trent were in the center of the floor, surrounded by family and friends taking photos. He found Leah near the band, coordinating the music schedule. How are you holding up? She asked. Fine, though I think I made an enemy of the groom. Leah glanced toward the dance floor where Trent was spinning Ava in elaborate moves that looked rehearsed. He asked you to fix his car? How did you know? Because he's been complaining about it all night. Dead battery in his precious Jaguar. He wanted to use it for photos. Marcus watched Trent dip Ava dramatically while the photographer captured the moment. He'll figure it out, Marcus said. I'm sure he will. Leah checked her tablet. The last dance is in about 30 minutes, then send off photos. After that, you're free. Thanks for looking out for me tonight. You shouldn't have needed looking out for, but I'm glad I could help. The band switched to a slower song, and Marcus watched couples pair up on the dance floor. He thought about the first time he danced with Ava at a friend's backyard barbecue. She'd kicked off her heels and danced barefoot on the grass while someone played old soul music from a phone speaker. That version of Ava felt like a different person than the woman gliding across the ballroom floor in her designer dress. Marcus? He turned to find Eleanor Whitmore beside him. Could I speak with you privately? She led him to a quiet alcove away from the music and noise. I owe you an apology, she said. I didn't realize you owned Hale Rio's detail services. You don't owe me anything. I spoke inappropriately earlier. I made assumptions. Marcus waited. Eleanor wasn't the kind of woman who apologized unless she wanted something. The truth is, she continued, I've been worried about Ava, about her choices. Her choices seem to be working out fine. Eleanor glanced toward the dance floor where Ava was laughing at something Trent whispered in her ear. Do they? She's been different since the divorce. Distant, like she's playing a role instead of living her life. That's not my problem anymore. Isn't it? You loved her once. The words hit harder than Marcus expected. Once felt like a lifetime ago. Once felt like yesterday. What do you want from me, Mrs. Whitmore? I want to know if she made the right choice. Marcus looked at Eleanor's face, searching for the trap, the angle, the way this conversation would be used against him later. But all he saw was a mother who was worried about her daughter. That's not for me to say, he said finally. Eleanor nodded. Perhaps not, but I think we both know the answer. She walked away, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts. The last dance came and went. The band played their final song while the remaining guests swayed on the dance floor. Marcus stayed in his alcove, watching from a distance. As the music ended, staff began setting up for the send-off photos. Guests gathered outside with sparklers and rose petals. The photographer positioned Ava and Trent at the top of the steps leading down to the parking area. Ladies and gentlemen, the band leader announced, please join us outside for the send-off celebration. The crowd moved toward the exits. Marcus followed slowly, in no hurry to watch the final act of this strange night. Outside, guests formed two lines creating a pathway from the steps to the circular drive. Dana was speaking urgently into her headset while pointing toward the parking area. "What's the problem?" someone asked. "The car for the photos won't start," Dana replied. "We're trying to arrange alternatives." Trent's face went red. "This is ridiculous. How hard is it to keep one car running?" The valet captain approached Trent carefully. "Sir, we've tried jumping the battery, but there seems to be a deeper electrical issue." "Then fix it." "Sir, we're not mechanics. We'd need proof of insurance to work on the vehicle, and even then—" "Insurance?" Trent's voice rose. "It's a dead battery." Marcus watched from the edge of the crowd as Trent grew more agitated. The perfect wedding night was developing its first major flaw. "Get someone who knows about cars," Trent demanded. "There has to be someone here who can fix this." Several guests looked in Marcus's direction, but no one said anything. "Sir," the valet captain said, "there are insurance liability issues with anyone working on privately owned vehicles. We'd need proper documentation." "This is insane," Trent exploded. "It's my wedding night. Someone fix my car." The crowd grew uncomfortable. This wasn't the fairy tale ending anyone had expected. Leah appeared beside Marcus with a small leather folder in her hand. "What's that?" he asked. "Insurance verification form. And something else." She opened the folder to reveal a spare key fob, in case you change your mind about helping. Marcus looked at the key fob, then at the chaos developing around Trent's broken Jaguar. "Why would you have a spare fob?" "Because I know people, and I know cars, and I know that sometimes the right person appears at the right time." Marcus took the folder and looked at its contents. Everything was properly filled out. Everything was legitimate. The car that won't start? 1967 E-Type. Electrical problems. Like you guessed. Marcus looked at the crowd, at Trent's red face, at Ava's embarrassed expression. "And if I don't help? Then they'll call a tow truck and finish the photos with a different car. The night will end badly for the bride and groom, but the world will keep turning." Marcus thought about it, about Trent's demanding tone, about the assumption that Marcus should fix other people's problems, about being seen as the help instead of an invited guest. Then he thought about Ava, standing in her wedding dress while her perfect night fell apart. "I have a different idea," he said. Epilogue. 10 minutes later, Ava and Trent stood posed for their send-off photos while guests held sparklers in the warm night air. But instead of departing in the broken Jaguar, they climbed into a rideshare vehicle that Leah had quietly arranged. The Lamborghini sat nearby, engine purring softly, untouched and gleaming under the venue lights. Several guests had approached the valet captain asking about the car, but he'd politely explained that it belonged to a guest and couldn't be used without proper insurance documentation. Trent had demanded to know who owned it, clearly wanting to negotiate its use for photos. But when the valet mentioned it belonged to Mr. Hale, Trent had gone quiet. Marcus stood with Leah near the venue entrance, watching the send-off photos wrap up. "That was kind," Leah said. "What was?" "Not making this about the car. You could have offered to drive them, made a big show of it, proved a point." Marcus shook his head. "Tonight wasn't about proving points." "What was it about?" Marcus thought about the question as Ava and Trent waved goodbye from their rideshare window. About seeing Ava in her wedding dress, about Eleanor's unexpected honesty, about Trent's demands and assumptions, about his own choices and dignity. "Closure," he said finally. The rideshare pulled away, and the crowd began to disperse. Guests headed to their own cars, the night finally over. "Mr. Hale?" The valet captain approached with Marcus's keys and a slight smile. "Beautiful evening for a drive, sir." "Yes, it is." Marcus tipped the man generously and walked to the Lambo. As he slid into the driver's seat, Leah appeared at the passenger window. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "for the insurance verification, for being professional when others weren't, for treating everyone with respect. You did the same thing. It's my job." "No," Marcus said. "Kindness isn't a job requirement, it's a choice." Leah smiled. "Drive safe, Mr. Hale." Marcus started the engine and pulled slowly out of the venue. The drive back to Charleston was peaceful, the roads mostly empty, the night air flowing through the slightly open windows. He thought about seeing Ava again, about how different she'd seemed in her wedding dress and perfect makeup, how far away she'd felt from the woman who used to fall asleep on his shoulder while they watched old movies. He thought about Trent's assumptions and Eleanor's apology and Leah's unexpected kindness, about being seen as the car guy and choosing to be something more. Mostly, he thought about tomorrow, about the BMW waiting at the salvage yard, about the customers who trusted him with their cars, about the business he and Nate had built together, one honest repair at a time. By the time he reached his apartment, Marcus felt lighter than he had in months. The weight of the past was finally lifting. The questions were finally answered. Ava had made her choice. She'd chosen status over love, appearance over authenticity, safety over truth, and he'd made his choice too. To show up with dignity, to respond with class, to leave with his self-respect intact. Marcus parked the Lambo in his apartment complex and walked slowly upstairs. His tuxedo had survived the evening without a wrinkle. His shoes were still polished. His bow tie was still perfectly knotted. In his bathroom mirror, he looked like a man who'd been to a wedding and behaved like a gentleman. A man who'd been tested and passed. He hung up the tux carefully and changed into comfortable clothes. Then, he made himself a cup of tea and sat at his kitchen table with his phone. Two messages waited for him. The first was from Nate. "How did it go? Are you okay? Call me when you get home." The second was from an unknown number. "Thank you for your professionalism tonight. If you ever need event planning services, I'd be honored to work with you." Leah Park Marcus smiled and set the phone aside. He'd call Nate in the morning and tell him everything. He'd probably save Leah's number, though he couldn't imagine needing event planning services anytime soon. For now, he was content to sit in his quiet kitchen and think about the day ahead. Monday morning would bring the BMW from the salvage yard. New projects, new challenges, new opportunities to do the work he loved. The past was finally where it belonged, behind him, and the future stretched ahead like an open road, full of possibility and promise and the quiet satisfaction of work well done. Marcus finished his tea and went to bed, sleeping peacefully for the first time in months. Outside his window, Charleston settled into the gentle rhythm of a city at rest, and in a shop across town, a Lamborghini sat in the darkness, its engine cool and its purpose served. Tomorrow would bring new stories, new chances to choose dignity over revenge, character over status, truth over appearance. Tomorrow would be a good day to build something worth keeping, one bolt at a time.